Good morning, good afternoon, folks. As Laura said, we have folks from all over the U.S. joining us from a whole bunch of different PI affiliates. And here's a quick shot at those guys and gals from across the U.S., from San Diego all the way across to Boston. And glad you're with us. Hopefully you find this program informative. And as Laura said, if you have questions, just go ahead and populate that Q&A button, and then we'll break a couple of times, and she'll prompt me for those answers, and hopefully I've got them, or we'll find a way to get those answers to you. So this program is basically, best way to say it is about 4 decades of observations and working with a variety of sales managers, owners across the industry. I've had the opportunity to consult with them in a variety of different ways. Some of it's personal observations from my experience in the industry, and a lot of it's just things I've seen over the years from a variety of folks talking to owners, might be in their boardroom, might be over a drink somewhere. But sales comp is really one of those critical issues to the industry, and incentivizing our sales force is crucial, and finding the right kind of folks is crucial as well. And we'll talk about those topics as a whole. So over the next 30 minutes, we're going to explore the more frequently used methods of compensation in the industry. And practically all of them have been around for years. But we'll share some of those ideas, what makes them click, what's the pros and cons. A lot of the information that we're going to share is based on the 2016 sales compensation survey that we ran last year. We had approximately 500 surveyed individuals, over 170 companies across the United States, all PIA members. And I'll be sharing some of that information. As Laura said, that data is available. It's about a 30-page book of data that you can get a hold of your local affiliate and see what they can do to get a hold of that survey for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Sales compensation is a key issue, as we all know, for our industry. Most printing companies spend about 9.5%. That's based on the PIA ratio studies on sales, compensation, marketing, all things sales. What's of interest is that the profit leaders, the top quartile of the ratio study, the guys and gals who average somewhere around 12% pre-tax sales, 11 to 12, I should say. That number for them is 8.1%, a little bit lower. So they do a little bit better job of managing how they spend sales comp. Regardless, that's neither here nor there. I just want to share that with you. But here's the important thing, the takeaway, I think. If I've observed a weakness in our industry over the years, that quite frequently our company goals don't align with compensation. Most folks say, hey, we want to create a sales compensation plan that helps us grow sales. But then after 2 or 3 years of that kind of plan, and the ownership is not happy because profitability has been given up. Again, that's a function and design of the plan. So you've got to keep that in mind, that if you're looking for profitability, being one type of sales compensation plan is just going to pay on sales may not be the best one. If you're just focused on profitability and you're paying on value added or gross margin, which is what we normally see, you might not get the sales growth you want. So you got to think about what your goals are as a company and design a plan accordingly. Of course, I'm a believer that you do both. You look at compensation for both profitability as well as sales. We again have to make sure that these plans that were put in place are going to give the incentives and, what can I say, give the dollars in the pocket of those sales reps that are out there every day selling for us. One thing I've seen, this is more so in the last probably 5 to 8 years, we'll call last decade, as digital has taken a bigger part of our industry, is that one size doesn't fit all as far as compensation is concerned. Where historically, we're just a lot of folks who are paid on commission, even though significantly still a good part of our industry does pay commission, pure commission. Is that we are now starting to see new account development being involved. We're talking about longer projects. Project engagements may take 5, 6, 8 months, whether it's a variable data campaign or a multimedia campaign or web portals, and accounts that are heavily involved with account maintenance. Compensation will have to vary depending on where your goals are in these arenas. So again, we'll talk more about that a little bit later as well. Let's look at our industry and the types of compensation we see. We really see 3 types. We see commission, normally paid on sales and or profitability. By the way, 55% of all the individuals we surveyed, firms that is, are paying commission of some sort. It could be value added, it could be gross profit, it could be on sale, but 55% of the industry does use commissions as their compensation methodology for their sales reps. Blended, which has been growing over the last 10 years as we've surveyed, is salary plus a bonus or salary plus a commission. Again, those come in all sorts of flavors, and we'll talk more about those later on. And of course, salary, which we don't see commonplace in the industry. We may see that with individuals that are maybe coming on as a new individual and a trainee, etc. So, Laura, just double checking. Are we seeing slides moving along properly? You're seeing my sales comm? Good. Just double checking. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk pros and cons first. We're going to talk about pros and cons of these plans. And then again, this is based on discussions with individuals over the years, talking to a variety of sales consultants, experts, and again, my observations. We're then going to talk plan design, and then we'll talk and finish about effective sales management and find the right kind of sales folks for us. So here's the pros of our commission plans. And this is number one. It's easy to understand. There are no questions of how a sales rep's going to get compensated. Normally, we see the majority of our commission plans in the industry are paid on gross sales. I have a $10,000 job. I'm being paid, for sake of argument, 10% of commission, $1,000. That's my take home for bringing that job in or making the sale. Value added, if you're not familiar with value added, this is another level. Now, this one has sort of, I call it a blend of profitability and sales involved with this. Value added sales are the sales itself, let's say a $10,000 job, and what we take out or reduce is the cost of outside purchases. Normally in our industry, that's going to be about 30%. Paper, buyouts as far as maybe trade work, etc. Whatever the components are that we're writing a check outside of our operation, what's left is value added. Consequently, in that same job, maybe the value added of that job is we had $3,000 worth of paper and outside purchases. What's left is $7,000. That's the value added of the job, and the sales rep gets a percentage of the value added. And I'm going to touch on this later on. We'll talk about gross profit as well, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because that is very, very seldom seen. But the point being is now I'm compensating on the dollars left that are really staying in with the company. That's the profit portion, if you want to call it that. The thing that we like about commission is it's a variable expense. If I'm paying 10% on sales, whether it's 100,000 or a million or 2 million, that number is the same. It doesn't vary a whole heck of a lot. It's 10% all the way across the board. Therefore, when I've got only $100,000 worth of sales coming in, I'm only paying 10% of that. Vice versa, I've got $2 billion of sales, compensation will be a little bit higher, significantly higher, of course. And that's what we want. We want a great incentive for our sales reps. And probably commission is, number one, a great incentive for our reps because they know that if they're selling more, they're making more. And the folks that are very self-motivated, that really want to grow their bottom line to themselves personally, and the successes of being a great sales rep, commissions are a great way to go in that arena. Now, let's talk about some of the cons. This, again, is an observation as I've talked to many owners over the years. They're fine when that sales rep, and I'll be real candid, the sales rep is making 50, 80, 90, 100,000, but all of a sudden when that rep is making possibly more money than they think is valid for whatever that might be, it could be the owner or manager's compensation, all of a sudden we have a great rep that's actually making more money. There's all of a sudden a little bit of a concern that all of a sudden I'm paying too much for commissions. There's the argument to that, though, in my mind, is if you got a guy or gal selling $2.5 million and $3 million in sales and they're compensated accordingly, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Those folks are bringing in the bacon. But regardless, that does tend to be a little bit of concern. Also, if the mix of work is, for example, a lot of that, we talked about value added earlier. Let's say a lot of the value added that's in that sale is maybe half of it's going to web shops who are farming a workout. All of a sudden, the profitability isn't as good. And again, that gets back down to how do we find the right kind of compensation plan, whether we're on a value added or gross sales, and make sure that our design up front is correct so we can make sure that we have the right kind of dollars flowing back to the company as well as the sales rep. Again, that's a perception. Another one and I see this less and less, is the concept that if I'm commissioned, I become an independent rep. If I go out and hunt, kill, skin it, and bring it in, over a period of time, I'm the guy that's doing all the work. I'm being paid for. Therefore, I feel I can take that work anywhere else. And that historically was true. We don't see that as much as we used to. We see that what I call broker mentality is really breaking down, that more and more companies, because you really are doing internal sales with CSR as well as external sales with a sales rep, and there's a much more of a concern with many sales reps leaving XYZ Litho to go across the street because of instability. They're not moving like they used to. So we don't quite see that independency as we used to in the past 10, 20, 30 years ago. So that I don't think is an issue as much, but it's still out there. It's still out there. The other one that we see, and I think is probably seen more in commission than other plans, but I think it runs across all plans, is at what point does the sales rep get to the level that they're making, selling $1 million in sales, are perfectly comfortable at making $100,000. That's their compensation, 10% on sales. We'll use that number again. And I just sit there and just make sure I maintain that account. Don't go out and look for more work. And I'm perfectly happy here. I don't need more. I'm happy at this level. I don't need to go out and find more work. That's true of any plan, though, I think. So that's a management challenge, and not necessarily is that a negative to a commission or any other kind of plan. Last one I think is the most interesting. Over the last probably 6 to 18 months, I've been having a lot of conversations with some fairly progressive owners who are looking outside of the industry to hire younger reps because they find the older reps aren't producing like they have in the past, or leaving the industry as they retire. And they find that many incentives in the pure commission don't work as well. Many younger people, especially Gen Y folks, don't feel comfortable in a commission environment. They really want to have some sort of backstop salary. They want to have maybe their incentives are willing to trade off a high compensation for some stability. These are things that are changing the way we look in this arena. And it's a major challenge because if you look around at your sales force, I wouldn't be surprised that most of your really good sales reps have been around for a while, and probably some over the next 5 to 10 years are going to be retiring. And then you've got to look at, where do I find you folks? And we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. Continuing, let's go to our blended plans, the pro. Okay, I'm going to put my bean counter hat on because I am a bean counter, so to speak. And creating a blended plan, a salary plus commission, salary plus bonus, however it might work. I can calculate that. I can put a cap on it. I can say, hey, I'm going to have X dollars put aside for salary, and the incentives are never going to go beyond twice the salary amount, whatever that might be. Therefore, if I know that this sales rep knocks the lights out next year, I'm not going to be paying an extraordinary commission. I know what my costs are going to be. So that can be, from the bean counter side, a positive. I know my expenses are going to be maximum. So I'm able to control my sales expenses in that manner. Of course, the questions we said earlier, is that what happens in incentives? Do I disincentivize my sales reps by doing that? Another issue. This is the one I think is of the most interest, and why we're probably seeing more blended plans. I've seen a growth over the last 8 years when we did our last survey on sales comp, that we saw a significantly more percentage of companies paying a salary plus or a blended plan. That may be a function of projects that take a lot longer to sell, whether they're variable data, integrated media projects. There's no longer that you go out and grab a job and you bring it in and you're put into production and off you go. These projects take a little bit longer to put together. The variable data, which is our digital part of our sales mix, has been a real challenge to many companies in trying to get traditional sales reps to sell it. And the reason why is, if you think about it, if I'm being paid pure commission and all I've got is a $500 job that takes a lot of work, that's going to go digital, and granted, I may be able to develop that $500 worth of little jobs into a big account over a period of time, but if I'm being paid commission for that, there's not a lot of dollars in it for me. Consequently, I'm going to put my efforts somewhere else. So we've seen, again, a process here, whereas companies make new hires to bring in folks focused on digital. There probably is a salary component to that because these things take a bit longer. So we're seeing that, as well as for companies that are selling and focusing on large accounts, Fortune 500, Fortune 100, where they're long tails involved. You're talking to marketing folks, you're talking to purchasing folks, you're talking to C-level executives. You're trying to develop a very large amount of sales, and from a large company that's going to have a lot of people involved. It takes a lot of work to get there. If you're paid pure commission, you may starve and say, hey, I'm going to go somewhere else. It's not worth my time. But with a blended plan, it is well suited for that kind of work if you're focused on trying to find that kind of work for your operation. Again, blending the right kind of compensation plan with the company goals. Cons, and I'll combine this. There's a lot more administration involved with these types of plans. You've got to be able to measure at what point in time did that sales rep get to the point where they have an incentive. Did they make their target? Let's say the target was at $50,000 a month in sales, and anything over that, they get X% or they get a bonus, whatever it might be. Now you have to be able to track that, you have to be able to manage it, and you have to be able to give that information in a very transparent manner back to the sales rep. I guess the trust factor. If there's not a trust involved, things break down very rapidly. With a gross sales commission, the rep knows exactly whether it's 6, 8, 10, 12% of sales, they know exactly what they're going to get paid. The more complex systems tends to be a little bit more challenging, but again, you have to be able to spend the time involved. And that's why many folks prefer commission plans, because there's none of this overhead, for lack of a better word, involved. But it's something, again, you've got to take into consideration in designing your plan, because if their goals are to find large accounts, or your goals are to develop some transactional type long-term accounts, you really got to be able to think about how do I build a blended plan to be able to do that. Before we get into plan design, Laura, do we have any questions at this point in time right now we want to address?
I have not seen any questions. Just a reminder to everybody, the Q&A button up in your left-hand corner, if you would press that and pose your question in there, and then I'll pass those on to Joe.
And just before we get into any of this next section, just touch on that most companies, when they bring on most young sales reps or trainees, they're normally on salary. They stay on salary for a while, and normally will transition into a fully incentivized plan with commission or blended. That's pretty well typical. I've always been asked, what's the typical time it takes to get a sales rep from ground up to full running? And normally the answer is 12 to 18 months. You may get someone who rocks it at 6 months, but normally it's a year to year and a half time period to be able to get a rookie, for lack of a better word, up and running. And again, a lot of it depends on where they're coming from, and we'll touch on that later on, how we've seen some folks being very successful in doing that. Do I see some questions coming up, Laura? We want to address those?
Let's see, we do. Here's one from Les Davis, asks, how much customer service support for commission salespeople?
Good question. How much customer service support? And it varies by type of company. It truly does. I don't have a good answer for you there on that, Les, because in the plants that I was involved with, we used a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 reps for 1 CSR. But our CSRs were very involved with billing, estimating, as well as production management. So it's really going to vary on the structure of your CSR, what they're doing to backstop the sales rep. That's one of those probably on our next survey that we do. We're probably going to be doing a survey in 2018. We'll probably want to do that to give some information back on that one. Let's take another one if you got one.
Okay, from Rachel. How common is straight salary in the industry? Noticed it wasn't covered in the pros and cons.
Rachel, a good question. The reason it's not covered, it's relatively less than 15%. We normally see it with very small companies, and we'll talk on that later on. I've got some statistics later on from our survey. We'll talk about that, but it's not very common in the sense of any we'll call it aggressive sales compensation plans.
We have.
Okay, well, let's take one more, and then we'll get back.
Okay, from John Dawson. We are a multi-state selling company and mainly in variable data processing. What type of commission plan would you recommend?
You know, I hate to say this because I don't know what your goals are, but you know, again, from my perspective, from my observations, and I'm trying to balance it from incentives as well as profitability, I would be looking at a blended type of plan. I think that because of the variable data nature, the really what you're trying to do is develop accounts. You're probably going to be doing project selling and team selling. I think a salary-based plan plus incentives, and I think the trick is creating the right kind of incentives to want your sales reps to grow their sales. I don't think you want to be stingy in that arena. I think you really want to be able to create the right situations. I'm a big VA fan, value added. I think it's essential to do and look at value added because quite frequently in some of these plans, these kinds of projects, you may be buying mailing work out, you may be doing a variety of different things that you need to be able to integrate into your marketing, and you may be doing a variety of buyouts. So rather than just looking at pure top line sales, I'll be looking at value added sales. For what it's worth, the quick answer, but without knowing more about the situation, it's hard to really get into that. So Laura, let's go ahead and we'll continue. You're going to see my email later on, you all. And if we don't answer your question, please feel free to email me and we'll be glad to respond that to you and hopefully a little bit more depth.
Great.
So continuing. Oops, got ahead of myself. I apologize. Let's go back to commission plan design. The gold standard years ago was 10% on sales. That's changed. Our survey shows that number is now 8.5%. That's a median, even though the range is between 6 to 10%. What's of interest, this is true whether you're in web, packaging, or sheet fit. That number doesn't change a whole heck of a lot. So a lot of our packaging guys, when we did the survey, we found that our packaging firms, we did not have enough to break them out in our survey, were very similar to our commercial sheet fit. So the numbers are very similar, 6 to 10% of gross sales with an 8.5% median. We saw that number, of course, drop a little bit with our web sales, but predominantly we saw that in cold web. In cold web, that number dropped probably down about a 6% number. That's typical, I think, because of our cold webs tend to be the margins are a little bit leaner, et cetera, et cetera. If you're on value-added sale, you see the range there, again, based on a 2016 compensation survey, that the range was between 6 to 12% with a 9.5% median. And if you think about it, there's about normally 1 to 2% spread difference between the paying on gross sale and paying on VA because, again, your dollars are different. We did not get any information on gross margin because it's not very common. If I recall correctly, out of the 180 companies, we maybe had 4 or 5 paying on gross margin, which is a gross profit of contribution. Again, how that number is calculated is sales, less materials and buyouts, less variable labor. And again, that's one of those challenging, very, for lack of a better word, not very transparent type of programs. You also get into arguments whether you pay gross profit on the estimate or on actual. And that, again, there's a lot of accounting and a lot of things that are involved with that. I cut my teeth with the first company I started with on a contribution type, and I'm a big believer of that, but it's very complex. I think there's other ways to skin that cat. And by the way, the percentages in that can vary. 15% to as high as 50%, depending on the type of work, type of printer, and how generous they feel. About 1/3 of companies will vary their commission rate based on a target. That I'm saying, for example, let's say my target markup is 20, 25%. Pick a number, doesn't really matter. That's my standard markup on when I estimate a job. If I have to reduce my markup to be able to take on a job where I have work that I really want to get and bring it in, about 1/3, it's a high 20s, 30%. Companies will vary the commission. So instead of paying 8.5%, they'll say no, and that kind of, when we drop it below X, we're going to pay 7%. If we take the job at cost, you're getting nothing, or you're getting 4%. It varies all over the place, and it's one of those things that we did not really try to track when we did the survey, but we did track that, again, there are a fair amount of companies that do reduce their commission. I did find this was more of a regional issue. I'm located in Dallas-Fort Worth, and our numbers in Dallas-Fort Worth were extremely higher percentage-wise. It was over half compared to other areas of the U.S. So that, again, varies area to area. Draw against commission is part of our plan design. Again, I think this is pretty straightforward. Most folks understand that basically that's a salary that someone's taking, and then that salary is charged back against the commissions earned. So if I took, $4,000 a month, that's $48,000. I made $100,000 of commission. Somewhere I'm going to have to pay back, or all I'm going to get is $52,000 of compensation. That's normally done on a quarterly basis. It can be done on a monthly, depends how much you want to do as far as calculations, et cetera, et cetera. As you see, the median is about $4,300 per month is what showed up in our sales comp survey. That was the median reported draw against commission, regardless of the type, whether it was white format, web, digital, sheet fed, packaging, et cetera. That number seemed to run across all lines. Normally, commissions are reconciled on a monthly basis. We know that for most companies. The big question with many is, when are the commissions earned? 43% upon invoice, in the sense of when that invoice is cut, that's when the commissions are paid to the individual, and about 1/3 you see upon payment. When we get paid, you get paid. Again, these are, what can I say? They're probably, again, more of a philosophy. It also depends on your cash flow, very frankly. And approximately 40% plan to reduce commission for slow pay, no pay. I was surprised at that number. I thought that number would have been higher, but it's not, in the sense that many companies at about 90 to 100 days, if they've not been paid, they start reducing the commissions to the sales rep. And of course, if they never collect the money, the sales rep does not receive a commission. The argument there is that the job of the sales rep is to help collect the money, and therefore they should have a commission structured around that. There's the other argument, which, as you see, is almost 2/3 of our participants saying it's not really the job of the sales rep to collect money, and it's up to the company to do the credit checks, and therefore the risk is not theirs. Two different philosophies, but you see that 40% do reduce commissions for slow pay or no pay. Blended plan design, I'm just going to touch on this because there are about as many different ways to skin this cat as there are printing companies. Normally, the base salary is set up to 60 to 80% of a target compensation. For example, if I think that a good target compensation for a sales rep is $100,000 a year, I'm going to set up a salary that maybe is $60,000 or $80,000 a year, then create incentives on top of that to be able to get into that target compensation if they meet their goals. Goals can be based on the amount of sales they're going to make, in the sense of, I'm going to say, if let's say it's a target of $750,000 annual sales. If I exceed that, there's going to be bonuses involved. There's going to be possibly percentages of commissions involved. I've seen everything. This is one of those that we attempted to survey, but we could not get a good set of data. But I can tell you that probably most companies were salary plus some sort of commission. We didn't see a lot of salary plus bonuses. Normally, it was like after a certain level of sales, either on a monthly, quarterly, whatever basis the company set up, there was going to be an override. The sales rep was going to get 2-3%, whatever it might have been, on those additional sales to create the incentive to get there. Some plans, and I just saw a handful, had also incentives based on account profitability. Again, the challenge here is that transparency. You start getting to the more complex type of the more complicated this plan is, the harder it is to count, the harder it is to build that trust factor, which is essential with your sales force. As I said here, we'll see the numbers later on, although not common in our industry, we're seeing a transition, for lack of a better word, less pure commission plans, more blended plan designs. We see that transition occurring over the last 5 to 10 years. And again, one area we're watching very carefully, and probably in our next survey, we're going to find a way to try to do some capturing some of these plan designs to be able to share with folks. Now, let me share some just numbers with you or for you from our survey. What I've done here is I've bolded up the areas in our sheet-fed digital wide format, web heat set, and web cold set of the predominant methodologies used in that industry by sales reps. So, for example, in the sheet-fed arena, 58% of the sales reps we surveyed were commissioned. As you see, as we talked about salary, the salary numbers are down here in that low range. And we found again that most of that was in smaller companies or extremely large companies in, for example, check printing or forms, very specific type of products that were being produced. But when you got to commercial sheet fed, commercial web, those numbers were heavily to the commission arena. Digital, wide format, web heat set, you see the numbers right there. Again, we had a lot more data than this in our survey. As I said earlier, nearly 30 pages of different data broken out at a national level as well as a regional level. One of the things we also asked, what was their annual compensation based on experience and different areas of the products that we are selling. By the way, these are medians. We decided to use median rather than averages because, for example, we had some very well-compensated sales reps that would have really skewed the data as far as the averages. So we used midpoint or median data. You can see there, for example, in sheet fed that less than 5 years, the median or midpoint was 51,000, and the high level for the very experienced rep was closer to 93,000. This information is good, I felt, because if you're designing a plan, you want to know where you really need to be today to get a good rep. You need to make sure that your plan is going to reflect a lot of this data. Otherwise, if an individual feels they're underpaid, they're going to be looking for other places. This is performance or sales, and then again, by size of company. I highlighted the what I call sweet spot for our industry, which is companies between 5 and 15 million. So that the average sales rep, or I should say the average number of a sales rep in sheet fed, they were averaging around $613,000 of sales. You can see the digital, wide format, and web. And again, the larger the company, no surprise, those numbers grow dramatically. Again, from the 2016 sales comp survey. So again, sharing those numbers with you to get an idea as you see, hey, what is my sales reps, are they averaging how much in annual sales? How does that compare to the industry? So before we go to our final slides and talk about managing, let's go ahead and break some questions again, Laura. So I think we've got some that we can talk about.
Okay, great. Let's start up here. Please talk about reps paying their own expenses on commission. What if their commission is treated as an expense? Do you see this as a functional and motivational tool?
Say that question. Give me that question again.
Please talk about reps paying their own expenses on commission.
Okay. What we found in the survey, and I did not get into it, is predominant, significant, 70–80% of the sales reps, regardless of compensation method, those were reimbursed by the company. So the sales reps themselves were not paying for that expense. That was being reimbursed by the company. And again, I'm going by memory right now, is that most companies, 75–80%, did not really have any kind of limits or caps. It was sort of a very subjective management as far as was someone spending too much money for travel, entertainment, etc. Hopefully that answered that question. Laura?
Okay, next one from G. Danner. When you mentioned 9.5% of sales and marketing expense, does customer service costs come from this line item? If not, what percentage is expected for customer service?
That is a good question. 9.5% comes from the PIA ratio studies. And the problem with that number is that it depends how each company reports it on their P&L. Some companies report that as a manufacturing expense, some report it as a sales, even though we'd like to shift that. And Ron Davis is when he does the survey and the chart of accounts involved, we'd like to see that more as a sales. The reality is it's all over the place. I really can't give you an answer because it depends on how the company reported that data. So I would tend to say that most companies, and I'm guessing, probably Ron Davis would be the person to ask. He probably has that information to give you specifically where that's part of that 9.5%. My gut feeling says there's a part of that expense of customer service that's included in that 9.5, but it's really hard to say because of the way that the data is collected with the PIA ratio studies. But I think that's a good Ron Davis question. I'll go ahead and I'll throw Ronnie under the bus. It's rdavis@printing.org. Ron's a great guy. I've known Ronnie for 30 years, and he'll be able to answer that a lot better than I can.
Okay, Joe S. asks, what tools are good to track cost if you implement a value-added sales commission program?
You know, that one, I think, on a value added, if most companies have some sort of cost system, that's a really fairly easy way to track what your actual value added costs are. I prefer estimate. There's so many variables that occur after the fact that if you're estimating a job, it's going to be $10,000, $15,000, and then you know that you estimate $3,000 of cost in the paper, you know what your VA is going to be, and you pay on the estimated. Because there are so many variables that can occur afterwards. All of a sudden, the pressure needed more paper, and they got to bring it in. Now there's additional cost of paper. Is that really the salesman's problem? You know, or you had 2 or 3 jobs right back to back that were exactly the same size, same color configuration, and all of a sudden you didn't need as much paper. So you're constantly arguing on that. So I prefer to just use estimates. They use your estimating program to calculate what the percentage, what the VA would be on the job. And again, when I'm estimating a job, I would break out for the rep, VA cost is going to be X, and that's what his compensation is going to be based on estimate. I hope that answers the question as well.
Okay, we have another one from Jason S. When are commission plans paid out? When the client pays or when the sale is complete?
And I think we talked about that earlier. We saw that number earlier that talked about when those are paid, and about 1/3 of the companies pay commissions when they get paid, but 40-some% pay upon invoice.
Okay, sorry. Does annual compensation include base salary and commission?
Yes, that annual compensation is total. What we asked for in our survey was basically what their W-2 earnings were. So that includes everything.
Okay, from R. Stevens, I've been considering changing my blended strategy by lowering existing customer compensation and increasing new business compensation. What input do you have?
Yes, I think it's a great idea. I think anything we can do to incentivize our folks to bring in new sales is a challenge, and it's good. And we're going to talk a little bit about later on here, just managing our sales, and maybe we'll touch on a few of the little topics around that arena. Let's go ahead and let's get another one, and we'll go to our next slide, which sort of wraps things up, and then we'll ask a few more questions. One more, Laura.
Okay, how would you handle compensation when a sales rep has to aggressively discount a job because competitors are purposely dropping their prices to get work?
As we talked earlier, probably 30% of the companies actually will reduce the commission on that because there's less money involved. Now, if you're paying a value added, that almost takes care of itself. If you're paying a value added, think about this. If I have a $10,000 job normally and I've got $3,000 of cost, my VA is $7,000. If I discount that job, well, to $9,000, my VA drops as well. Therefore, my salesman right there in itself is going to get less commission. And that's why VA is so important, because and let's face it out there, y'all, it's a very competitive marketplace, and it has been and will continue to be so. There's where value added has a good way to bend the curve, rather than having this scale that says, okay, if I get a 25% markup standard, you get 8%, but between 15 and 18% markup, you get X, and between here and there, you get Y. It's a little bit more challenging, but definitely I would be of the ilk, if you want to call it that. I would have some way of reducing commission. Okay, Laura, let's go ahead and continue our last slide. We'll come back and answer a few more here in closing.
Okay.
Okay. And this is my observation of years and years in the industry, that too many managers think if I create the right kind of sales plan, that I just have to put it in place and it's going to manage my sales force. If I say you're being paid on commission, immediately you're going to go out there and knock the world dead by going and getting what you want and bring it into the plan. The problem with that, and I think most folks have done this for a while, realize that, you know, if you've got a person that's just fully focused on sales, you may not like what that person is bringing to the shop. It's not the right kind of mix. So I think that, again, the incentive has to be there, but also individuals have to be managed. They've got to be given goals. They've got to be given directions of what kind of work you want, what kind of support they need to have. So just having a well-effective or well-designed comp plan is not going to manage your sales force. It's really a lot more than that. Just one tool in managing your sales force. What do I have here? I have been a big proponent of this for years, and I'm seeing more and more of it come to pass. We really have changed from basically in the world that I started in the 70s and saw into the 90s, where you just had to, there was so much print out there. You just gave someone some business cards, said, I'm paying you a commission, go out there and knock them dead, and most folks did. It's changed. You really need where mass communication that's become a commodity in many people's eyes. We're competing with other medias more so than ever before. So what we're seeing is folks that are business development folks. We are seeing folks that I call hunters and farmers. And let's start with the hunter. That's our traditional sales rep. They're out there trying to hunt stuff down and bring it in, and commission is the best way to reward those sort of folks. Business development folks, we're seeing now because of the complexity of the marketplace. Our hunters really don't have time to go looking for business. They need to be paid immediately in their mind. So they're not going to spend a lot of time developing business because there's no money in it. Consequently, what we're seeing is over the last 2 to 4 years, many firms hiring a business development person to go out there and develop the strategies, develop the contacts, to be able to develop the brand of the company out there in a variety of ways. And that person has to be salaried because of some base salary. And then, again, back to what I talk about here is a blended plan is what we have to look at. And once that person has the right kind of prospects, we'll call them warm, hot prospects, then they can turn them over to the hunters to be able to get there and close. Or in many cases, they can turn them over to what I call the farmer, which is basically account maintenance. And those are the individuals that really are out there to maintain the account. And that, if you think about it, it really is the role of some customer service people. And we're starting to see some discussion over the last 5 to 8 years of that kind of internal or inside sales rep. We call them maybe a customer service rep. Is really an inside sales rep. Is there a way we need to also incentivize them? Because in many cases, that hunter has brought as I use, the carcass in of the mammoth and gone on to go find the next mammoth. But those folks that are having to skin it and put it through the plant are doing all the work, and they'll go out there and help. And in many cases, they're going out and bringing more work in just by keeping that customer contact flowing. Is there ways to create incentives for them? Discussion is going on more and more and more so. But again, what I'm getting at is one size does not fit all. This one, I could spend hours talking about, and I'm going to try to summarize it. I've had this conversation with several folks over the last couple of weeks. Where do I find new reps? In the old days, you went down and stole from your competitor. That doesn't happen as much today for a variety of reasons. One is that individual who has significant sales, let's say doing $750,000, $1.5 million, $2 million, may not be very crazy about going across the street to someone that may or may not be there in a year, 2 or 3. They have developed a real good working relationship with the existing plant, and you may not have that same capabilities. More so is what we've seen on the other side is companies have developed very integrated processes of selling. That customer service plays a real key role. The plant management plays a key role. More and more team selling being done. So what we're seeing is in the past where a rep could pick up their hat and go across the street, they might take 80% of their business with them. Not immediately, but they could very well over a year to 2 years take 80%. That's not happening anymore. We're seeing, and a conversation I've had with owners, that number may be 20%, if that. So consequently, we're not seeing folks quite willing to move. So if you're out there looking for another $1 million or $2 million in sales, I say it, and of course I'm a little biased because it's the business I'm in, go buy someone. You have a better shot of growing your business that way rather than trying to do it organically. Therefore, you've got to find ways of grooming your own reps. Where do you find those new reps? You need to look at other industries. You need to find folks who have been very well trained in sales, that are solution sellers. The days of getting that press operator, pre-press guy, and making that individual your next sales rep is gone. Customers don't really care about trapping or dot gain as much as they used to in the past. They really are looking for solutions. So you have to find folks who know how to sell solutions. This is one reason I think so many women in our industry have done very well. They're great solution sellers. They know how to integrate, how to solve solutions. They're problem solvers. And they don't get too involved. And this is I'm talking about the new reps now, men and women. Don't get too engaged about the dots. They want to find ways to help their customer. And again, those are normally trained sales individuals. The downside for most companies is that individual is going to want a salary. They're not going to be wanting to pay commission because they'll start. So they're coming in, probably a blended plan is what you have to look at. You're probably talking $50,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year salary, which again creates some real overhead issues for a lot of companies. But in my mind, long term, that's the right solution, is trying to find well-trained sales folks from other industries. Also, that also means testing. You really need a good job of testing and interviewing to make sure that, one, they have the right kind of skill sets, and also they make a good fit for your company, because company culture is critical for your sales reps and for success on both sides. For that trainee, I'm still a believer of the colleges. There are tons of colleges out there still teaching printing management technology. When I look, and I serve on several boards of some of these universities, many of these kids go into sales. But you know what's interesting? They go into sales for suppliers. They're not going to sales with a lot of print providers. And I think that's a good area to look at, because these individuals, these young people, are very passionate about print. They understand the overall process. Many cases, when you look at the universities, like, of course, my university, Cal Poly, you look at RIT, Clemson, University of Houston, these young people are being taught integrated media. They know much more than just print. And that's a critical part going out there in today's world. So you have to look at your colleges. Now, again, they're young. You have to think of different ways to compensate them. As I said earlier, many of these young people don't want a pure commission. They are probably going to want a salary, and a significant salary. I think last time I looked, a lot of these kids are knocking down $50,000 to $60,000 a year, the good ones, for the starting salary. So you got to think about that as well. Sales teams. And this is one that I've been exploring recently, is that we're seeing more and more team styling within the industry. So you have someone internally that's a digital guru or IT guru that's part of your sales team if you're involved with integrated media. You know, there's, again, when in the old days we would find that pressman and put them out there as a sales rep. Maybe you have someone internal in your sales team that could make that next leap to being an outside sales rep. Again, somewhere to look. There's internal. It's always nice to have homegrown folks. But again, that's a challenge today as we are leaner and much more technology oriented. So those are, again, my thoughts. We could go on for hours talking about this kind of information, and we've gone for approximately 50 minutes, and I think it's time to start wrapping this up. As I said earlier, please feel free to, and we'll try to get, marketing. Let me just touch on this real quick. I forgot I added this slide earlier. Marketing plays a much bigger role today than it did in the past. I think we have to really focus on that. More and more companies are making this the role of the business development person. That's really the marketing individual, how to get our brand out there, how to promote it, because again, we're competing with so much more media than we have in the past. We have to create that. I hate the word branding. It's been used for years, but it's true. You got to create your brand. You got to make sure people understand that. So let's close it down right there. Get some more Q&As. As I said earlier, that's who I am. That's my email. If we don't get the chance to answer your questions, feel free to give me a shout on that email, and we'll do what we can. And hopefully, next time we do another web presentation like this, we can answer more questions. Laura, let's go ahead and answer what we have.
Okay, from Jeffrey. If it takes 200 days to collect payment, should the sales rep be non-commissionable?
I'm laughing because if you ask me, I'd say yes. But when we look at the survey, the survey says that's not commonplace. There's again, I said earlier, they're not, many companies don't really hit a sales rep for that. I think that, again, there should be some sort of penalty there. I wouldn't take the individual salary commission totally away, but as a company, you've made less money. Plain and simple.
Okay, from Charles. Are most paying higher average rates for new business for a short term, 12 months?
I'm going to do that anecdotally, because when we surveyed, we didn't really answer that question. I had a few folks who were very generous and shared their whole comp plan with me when we did the survey. But we are seeing, and again, anecdotally, my conversations, yes, that we're seeing, for example, let's say my base rate's 8% of sales. I might be paying 10%. for new business, and then transitioning that after a year or 2 years to a different rate. And yes, I think that's a valuable way to look at it, because you want new business and you've got to be able to get it. The argument, and I'll put my bean counter hat on right now, is that you may have to discount more aggressively to bring some of that work in, because well, let's face it, new business is not really being created out there, and therefore there's going to be less margins. But yin yang, I think that, yeah, you got to look at that.
Okay, Joe S. says, our shop averages $185 per sale. CSRs often fill the orders for salespeople. Do you suggest reducing the amount of commission if the CSR handles the sale?
I think you got to look at that. You got to look back. I don't know if I'd look at commission per se, as I would look at the entire compensation plan, because you get, let's face it, when you start reducing commissions, you create some disincentives. But if you take a look at the whole plan as itself, how's that integrate? How's it work? I think you got to find a way to change your compensation methodology. Yes, you got to change a way, find a way that you change your methodology. Maybe you go back to, you pay commissions for X amount of time, or you pay it like we just talked about earlier for new business, and then you bleed it out. But I think you just can't cold cut, say, okay, after this point in time, you no longer get any commission. You've got to find a way to blend it out. But again, it's got to be upfront, and you've got to be able to aggressively look at it. You also have to look at one thing that we've not talked about is account profitability. There are some firms that will look at accounts and say, yeah, I know that my CSR has a lot of work in here, but my account's very profitable. And that account really is very profitable to the firm. Maybe we don't want to mess with commission on that. So you got to look at all sides of it.
Okay,
How's that for a wishy-washy answer?
Jeffrey says, with a gross sales plan based on straight commission, should overs or AAs be included as commissionable, since they are not really sold items?
I'm a believer that if the invoice says $15,000, regardless how you got there, that's sales.
Okay.
So yes, the answer would be yes. That's part of your salary.
Kelly asked, how do you compensate sales teams, team selling?
You know, I don't have an answer to that, because we have not seen enough of that out there right now to really give you a good answer. I really think that's one that probably, because we are starting to see more team selling out there. How do we do it? I mean, historically, the way we see it right now with team selling, you have a salesperson who's commissioned, and then you have internal folks who are salaried. Historically, folks who are salaried don't want to go on commission or any kind of incentive in that manner. But you need to find ways of rewarding them. I think that you've got to really look at that one. And personally, I would try to find a way to share the wealth, so to speak, of that account with those individuals, because it is a team sell. And I don't have a good answer. The reason being, I've not seen enough out there to give you an answer saying yes or no or whatever as far as what the plan looks like. But I would definitely feel, I think you've got to look at it as far as how do I compensate that team, whether it's through bonuses or profits. I would be leaning a little bit more to profitability on that one, because you've got individuals who are being paid a salary that make up that team. So I would be looking at some sort of, what's the profit of that account, and maybe find some way to be able to measure that and then compensate on that.
Okay. Charles says, Joe, can you clarify the role difference between a business development rep and an inside sales rep who supports a sale made by a hunter?
Yeah, in my mind, that business development person is out there cold calling. If you want to think about this, in the old days, you went out and made cold calls. You knocked a lot of doors, and you did a lot of prospecting. And because business was so different and prior to 2007, that it was easy to that sales rep who was on commission, you did enough calls, you brought that business in. Today, because you're competing with so many different media, it takes a lot longer, but you got to be out there knocking doors. So that business development person is out there knocking on doors, developing accounts, and then bring them in, versus the person who's inside who's supporting the sales that have already occurred. I hope that answered the question, Laura. Does that make sense?
Made sense to me.
Okay.
I haven't gotten any notes. We have one here. What are your thoughts on compensation for a farmer that year after year brings no new accounts when you're trying to grow your business? On a blended plan, do you pay hunters a higher percentage than farmers?
Oh, that's a good one. That one I've been asked many a time by many folks. We see that with a lot of individuals who listen, are my age. They're in their 60s somewhere and really have good accounts, but they're not wanting to go out there and bust their rears like they used to. And again, that's understood. If I was in that person's shoes, I would find a way to bring that back down into a salary and incentives on top of that, so that if that person's not growing that business, they're going to be hit in the pocketbook. I think you've got to keep in mind that they've done a lot of work for you to maintain that account, and they've got to be rewarded for that. That's what the salary portion is. But there's got to be something in there to create the incentives to say, look, we still need you to grow new business. So that's where if you had a blended plan, maybe you do a 20% reduction if they don't meet certain goals. That's the way you look at it. You create that incentive to say, if you're able to generate beyond this number here, you're going to get some more dollars. Otherwise, your salary's been cut. And that's done quite frequently. Never pleasant, but you have to look at profitability of the firm, especially in today's reduced margins. Laura, I know we've got quite a few questions out there. Let's. What do you think? We're at an hour. Do you want to take one more, or how do you want to handle this?
Well, we've got let's. If you're okay, we've got a few more minutes. If that's all right with you.
Not a problem.
Griselda asked, what about perks, health insurance, profit sharing for commission?
Good question. That's in the survey. Predominantly, practically every company pays that for the sales reps. They're not treated any differently in that sense. I would say, I'm coming off the top of my head again, 90%. I mean, we saw a few that would not pay for that for the reps, but in many cases, that's an employee perk, and the reps that's pay. If the company pays for insurance, 50% or whatever the number might be, that's same treat. The rep is treated the same way.
Another one, in a previous slide, it appeared that a small company digital salesperson averaged about 100,000 in annual sales, and the average sales compensation was 50,000. Are those numbers correct?
I don't like those numbers.
Yeah, I think that's.
If you look at perspective, let's look at it just real quickly. $50,000 comp, 100,000 sales. That means you've got $50,000 of contribution to overhead or value of sale of contribution over. We'll leave it at that. Contribution. Well, part of that is paper and buyout. So what's left? Let's say it's 30,000 or whatever it might be. Then you got to look at all the benefits that you've had that you're paying that employee also, because you're paying FICA, FUTA, you're paying insurances, and maybe that 50,000 included in there. I don't know, but that doesn't look like a good number to me. If you take a look at the numbers we saw earlier, let me jump back here. And you look at that less than 5 million sheet fed. So that individual was probably averaging about $50,000 in salary. There's what they should be performing to. $500,000. That's a better ratio than 100,000. Make sense?
To me. What about having in-house incentives, a carrot? If you bring in a variable data job, you will bet $100.
I've seen that all over the place. A lot of small companies have done that for years. By small, I'm saying, less than 10 employees where the owner's a sales rep. A lot of times a press operator or a desktop operator has client contacts. And I think that's fair game, in the sense that individual is able to talk to a client or bring some work in. They get a little perk, a little commission. I've seen that for years. The thing is that on that one is that you've got to create an incentive to bring in additional sales, and then it's been done. I think that's a valid response.
Okay. Greg White asks, my company is very diverse, from digital, screen, and offset to permanent displays. The industry typically pays display sales at a different rate for display versus print, and I have many older salespeople on a traditional percentage of sales. And I have new hires that I have hired with a blended commission plan of salary plus lower commission. I really would like to try and work the entire team towards the blended plan. I think is better, but what is your opinion on how to get the legacy team to switch without losing them?
Yeah, that's always a challenge whenever you have that. By the way, what I found of interest in our survey was very few companies pay different commissions for different products. Most of the companies, and again, I think because we're dealing with so many traditional commercial printers who added product lines, they paid the same commission whether it was a portal sale, whether it was a wide format sale, whether it was a web sale, or whether it was a sheet fed sale. I was myself very surprised at that number. Regardless, I get back to the answer. I think like anytime you make a plan change, you do it over time. I think you have to sit down with each rep, and you may end up with a different plan for each rep. It's not uncommon for companies to have different plans for different reps. In other words, you don't have a common plan for each individual. I think anytime you make a change to someone's compensation plan, you got to make it as simple as possible. I know because of my experience, a couple of times having done that, and as a general manager of printing operations, and boy, I had a lot of grief from my reps for years afterwards when we made plan changes. So I think the transparency is important, but I think you have to explain to them why you're doing it and important, and over time. It's got to be done over a certain period of time so that they're allowed to not totally lose money just day one, but they know that they can do certain things and perform to that they're really going to be no worse off.
All right. I think we had one more just pop up. Hold on. If you change a plan, how much time should you give the change? Is 3 months notice too much?
Well, that's as I stated earlier, that a plan change, I think you've got to look at it. Definitely a 3-month notice. Depends on, let me rephrase this. Do a full analysis of what the impact's going to be to your sales reps. In the case I was talking about earlier with myself, we found some reps are being rewarded better because we went to value added. And others were really getting hit between the eyes. In one case, one guy was going to make 15% more, and the next one of our women's sales reps was going to make 20% less. So you got to look at those things. At least 3-month warning, and then you might want to transition that over a period of time. And that's going to be a challenge, maybe a year, that you're going to transition that schedule over so that they get someone accustomed to it, and a lot of communications. I can tell you that. I thought I was doing a lot of communications, and I could have done a lot more, because you have to constantly working with your sales team to make them understand that this is best for everyone in the company, not just them. They're not being penalized, but it's a challenge. But I think at least a 3-month warning, and then figure a 6 months to a year transition period. Okay. Laura?
Great. Just let everybody know we did record this session. We will be sending you out a recording of the session as well as Joe's slides. And then a reminder about the compensation booklet from 2016. Your local affiliate will have this book available to you, and we encourage you all to participate in the 2018 survey. Correct, Joe? That'll be going out to all members?
Yeah, 2018 will be our next schedule. We're not doing one this year because compensation plans don't change that much year to year, but we do our wage survey every year. Wages do change as far as our plant and management folks, but sales comp plans don't change that much, and probably 2018 will be our next scheduled one.
All right. All right. Thank you, Joe, very much for participating in all the affiliates across the country. We had a total of 140 people joining us. So what a terrific turnout, and I hope you all have a fabulous day. Thank you.